Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Shaw Lupton, and I lead strategic advisory at CompStak. Over the last year or two, I've had a lot of conversations with investment, research, and asset management teams across the industry. And one theme keeps coming up. The firms that seem to be performing best right now are not just finding good assets, they're building operating models that let them see, explain, and act on value that others can't. So, for a long time in CRE, the edge came from sourcing, capital access, or timing. And those things are still critical, but they're no longer sufficient. So, what we're seeing now is that performance increasingly depends on how well firms run the full life cycle: underwriting, asset management, investor communications, using data that's consistent, defensible, and actually connected across teams. So today's goal is to hear directly from operators at sophisticated investment platforms about how they think about data as part of their operating model. What's working, what's changing, and where the watchouts may be. So I'm really pleased to be joined by three practitioners who approach this topic from different but highly complementary perspectives. So starting with Brad Otis, Chief Operating Officer at Cabot Properties, where he oversees platform operations, asset management, and execution across an international industrial portfolio. Jessica Chacha is the Head of Product Management for Investment Systems at KKR, focused on building scalable investment and portfolio infrastructure across multiple strategies. And Mark Fitzgerald is the Head of Research at Affinius Capital, where he leads market research, pricing frameworks, and portfolio analytics. Thank you so much, speakers, for joining me today. I'm really excited to get into it with all of you. So to kick things off, a round robin question, and that's: how has the role of data inside your organizations changed over the past few years, and how do you see it evolving in the near term?
Want me to kick it off?
Yeah,
I'll
Mark,
take that question straight after.
why don't you kick us off?
I think from a from a research perspective and from an organization perspective, I think the power in terms of creating analytics using some of the new technologies that are available over the last few years has been immense. In terms of the importance of that data, I think it's akin to probably what a lot of people are going through right now as it relates to New Year's resolutions. So if you're looking to clean up your diet, in order to do that, you need to restock your pantry with the right foods and ingredients, and you need the basic tools: pots, pans, knives, et cetera, I think, to cook those healthy meals. I think from that analogy, having clean, organized data sets is really the key ingredients for what's necessary. That's really the most important thing. And then you have to have the right cooking instruments, which are some of those baseline technologies. And I think in terms of clean data, increasingly, it doesn't necessarily mean structured data. I think it's more about the right data storage and the right data processes to get that information stored in an organized fashion so that it can be leveraged and mined. So that's really, to me, one of the most powerful applications that we've seen from some of the generative AI tools is the ability to, read and pull out key information out of those organized data sets and create, proprietary data for the organization and for the models.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Mark. Can you think of some specific examples about how you guys are maybe extracting new data insights that maybe wasn't possible before some of these new technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think, several years back, we were leveraging OCR technologies to try to pull information out of PDFs. I think, many folks in the industries and some of the vendors are looking today of how to capture, a great example would be lease comps, sales comps, or deals in the market using OM data, for example. I think if you are able to, with some basic training exercise that is increasingly, I think, accessible to non-technical folks, you can train these models and, create some pretty powerful applications that can reduce what was previously, some manual processes into something that's much more automated and organized.
I think that's a great example. Jessica, how has the role of data changed at KKR, and how do you see it evolving in the near term?
Yeah, I think, very similar to Mark's answer where, probably 4 or 5 years ago, the data was housed in spreadsheets and everyone thought of data as their own data set and I own my data. And now we're really thinking differently in terms of data democratization and also not just using data to look back and see what have we done or how did our portfolio perform, but really to look into the future to say, like, what if we do X? What if we do Y? How will this impact my portfolio? So really pivoting from looking backward to looking forward. And also, here at KKR, how do we bring data across our businesses? So we have, for example, a big equity and a credit business. So how do we use data platforms to connect two different businesses who before would have to go walk over to each other to talk about deals? And how do we make that more efficient on a day-to-day basis?
That's great. So connecting across data platforms, starting to look more forward into the future. Brad, does this resonate with you? How has the role of data changed at Cabot, and where do you see it evolving in the near term?
Yeah, so very similar to Jessica and Mark. Data really hasn't changed over time, right? It's just how do we collect the data and form one source of truth for all the teams to work off of. We've been leveraging Power BI quite a bit for the teams to have that one central location of all the data. One We've also been subscribing to places like CompStak that if you've noticed that the OMs most of the time don't have these comps in them anymore, and so getting accurate and timely data from subscriptions like a CompStak have been very beneficial for Cabot.
That's great to hear, Brad. I'm curious from all of you, with all this change happening, with data really coming to the forefront across your operations, how are you tooling your operating models to keep pace with the rapid advances we're seeing in analytics and AI? Are you thinking across governments, the tech stack, culture, other factors?
I think just to go back to one point from that last question, I think, Brad mentioned it in terms of, everyone being on the same page and having accessible tools. And, Jessica mentioned in terms of data democratization, but I think it's increasingly, how do you pull that information into systems and out of spreadsheets, right? So that everyone's working on the same playbook and the data that
Yeah.
asset management looking at is the same as what we're seeing in development and the same in research. And so we can leverage those data sets on top of each other. So that's really been one key and is really important. I think in terms of the operating models, one of the biggest keys or one of the biggest challenges and keys, I think, in terms of, the rapid pace of transformation of some of the applications that are available to the business is really, you almost, I think the way we see it, you need to take a barbell approach. I think on the one hand, the younger workforce tends to be more comfortable with a lot of the tools, and they're the ones getting their hands dirty with the data and maybe have the time to think about new approaches to how we should be leveraging the data sets and assimilating and using these data sets. But at the same time, given how quickly the world's moving and, the toolkit and the vendor options are expanding very rapidly, that you need people who sort of can see across the organization so you don't get too many duplicative efforts or groups that are purchasing very similar tools with similar capabilities. And that's important both from a cost perspective, but I think also from a data organization perspective, because these tools are so powerful, you eventually want, I think a lot of the data sets to be rolling up to the same models and be able to speak across functional areas.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
So a
would,
barbell approach, or said another way, sort of bottoms down and tops up.
Yeah.
Jessica, how does that resonate with you, and how are you tooling
yeah,
your operating models at KKR?
I agree with a lot of what Mark said. And I think a lot of it comes down to culture and cultural change. We all know that real estate is a handshake and a relationship driven business, based on your contacts in the market. And it's really getting, both top down and bottom up to really agree on just new processes, new ways of thinking to really standardize how they're underwriting, how they are portfolio managing and asset managing. So I think it's really that top down and bottom up culture that needs to really help advance these initiatives. And then, frankly, in my mind, we're not algo trading here, right? Like it's a slower moving business. So I think the technology that's available today can, is strong enough for our needs in terms of a lot of what we need to do. It's just really figuring out how to standardize, how to create consistent data models and then workflows to really make it into a machine, especially in the more flow nature businesses.
I want to pull on that thread a little bit more. As leaders at your companies, what are you doing to set, like, what specific things are you doing to sort of set your teams up for success where they can, potentially drive some of this innovation in a focused way that actually drives the business forward?
I think what we've been doing is that the young crew is educating the older folk on how to use this new technology, and we've set up monthly uh, meetings where we talk about how they're using ChatGPT and how AI is helping their processes, and what can we do better and faster. So it's really giving the tools to this to the employees to play with, and then coming back together and organizing what works and what doesn't work.
think that's exactly right. And, you don't want to have one group off building tools kind of on their own and then bringing them to the large organization. I think it's really important that you get buy-in from the groups that are going to be the main consumers of these tools in terms of what the metrics are, what data sets are going into it. I think Jessica said it very well. The data quality and the data time series are not at the level where you would really be able to build an algorithmic trading type strategy in real estate, right? We're not looking at daily or hourly investment horizons. We're looking at years. And some of these data sets are very new. We don't have a long time history. So it's really, I think it's increasingly and incredibly important to get buy-in from the teams that are going to be using this and make them part of the building process, which also gets them interested in contributing their data and contributing their views, which is really important to making the models and the output better.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
exactly.
very much. Go ahead, Jessica.
Oh, no, sorry. I was just going to say to Brad's point, a lot of what we're doing here is one, we work extremely closely with our businesses who are the ultimate users of these tools. And, through various forums, we talk to them almost on a daily basis. And then what we've done as well is we kind of have these task forces that, we'll have in our real estate credit team, for example, an AI task force, an underwriting task force, et cetera. And then we get, those more junior folks who are the ones day in and day out modeling, meeting with our technology teams and trying to in solution together of how do we work on underwriting, how do we automate X, how do we automate Y. So I think it's really a partnership with the business and really have the ability to listen to their needs and then just translate them into incremental, epics. And then ultimately, how do we build this into a software platform?
Jessica, that's really interesting. I want to ask a few follow-up questions there for a firm like KKR that has a dedicated leadership around advanced analytics, doing product development. You and your teams, when you're sort of orchestrating those task forces, coming to the table with different stakeholders of your company, what does the composition typically look like, and like how are you getting engagement at all levels of the org?
Yeah, I would say that we're very lucky in that we have very strong senior support for all these. So we effectively will take the top down guidance to say that, for this initiative, we need 2 asset managers and 2 underwriters and 1 person from legal. And so we take that top down guidance and then we build those teams and then we as product managers work with them to solution that out. So we take the buy-in from the top and then they really help bring the teams together because often there are multiple teams, even though it's one big umbrella team, if that makes sense.
That's great, and it's a model that I think a lot of firms could probably apply at different layers. So even for firms that, a lot of CRE firms that are watching today probably don't have a dedicated product team, but I think Brad's model of having sort of an innovation group or a more multidisciplinary task force coming together and surfacing what are the priorities, where can we apply data to up our game, is a model that probably most any firm could start doing. So, Brad, I'm curious to talk about how you that sort of came to be at Cabot, and then who all is involved from your leadership, and who's kind of champions that innovation initiative at Cabot.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're not a very large organization, so everyone is involved. I think it really spearheaded from the younger generation asking for these tools. They most of these most of the new analysts in our group, their hobby is to play around with this AI technology, and so we do a lot of listening to the younger folks, what they want, what they need, and then you put some guardrails around them, and you spend as much time with them as you can and understand what their end goal is. So a lot of trial and error.
I think that's a really important lesson that I think bears repeating. For the CRE leaders watching this recording, and thinking about how to sort of create an atmosphere of innovation where teams can innovate in with guardrails. I think if you haven't sort of prioritized that, I think now is a good time to prioritize it, because with everyone I'm talking to, whether you realize it or not, your teams are applying these tools because there's just such an incredible payback in terms of efficiency, and in terms of getting more quickly to insights. And so I think if you haven't done it already, now is a great time to take a look at what can we do in terms of guardrails, in terms of governments, and also in terms of having a culture where we're touching base on these things, and we're actually focusing these efforts and these skills around problems that will actually move our business forward.
Yeah, I would add, Shaw, that we do spend a lot of time talking to other companies like Jessica and Mark, and understanding what there's a lot of collaboration that's going on out there, and it's good to see that most people are willing to share what they're finding is good and what's not good. And I think that's really important because this is all new to all of us, and it moves real quick, and it's nice to see everyone coming together and trying to share different ideas.
Yeah, and I think that's, Brad, the beauty of the real estate business. Again, relationship driven. We're all willing to let see what's inside of what we're doing here, and then yeah, ultimately show and tell, because we all have the same goal, and we're all probably using a lot of the same data sources to help underwrite. We're probably talking to the same brokers, et cetera. So I think the more we can help each other, the better. Given again that, I think compared to other markets, probably more public markets, we're a bit behind in terms of using data, like, standardizing data so you can have, one NOI across all multifamily in the country, something like that.
Brad, just to circle back and maybe dig a little deeper into that idea. So from your standpoint, looking across the organization from the seat of a COO, where have you been most excited about the impact of the business of sort of these relatively early investigations in advanced analytics that you guys have been doing?
I would say that the biggest leap we've gone forward hasn't really driven a lot of investment decisions. It's been really just making our processes here internal especially the asset management team, more efficient, faster, repeatable, accurate information. So I would say we're still trying to figure out the mousetrap on the investment side, but on the investments on the asset management side of the house, it has really made progress, especially with leases, renewal information, market rent increase, annual rent increases, and things like that. Has been great standardizing the whole portfolio. When you have 1,000 tenants and you're in, I don't know, I think we're in 50 different markets, so it's good to have that all standardized, and AI has definitely helped us do that.
Yeah.
That's great. I had the same question for Mark and Jessica. Where have you been most excited by your company's investments in advanced analytics and AI?
I think for us,
Sure.
it's really about connecting our businesses together, and being able to use AI to say, I am a private credit investor. What have we done in X part of the house that's relevant to this and this investment? And what other information do we have on the private side? Obviously, that could help influence this. So I think for us, it's about, and we call it using the whole brain here. Like, how can we use AI? How can we incorporate chatbots initially, just so we can go ask very simple questions of what are we doing in other parts of the firm that can ultimately help, perhaps win a deal or effectively manage that deal. So I'd say there, and then I would say in the real estate space specifically, I think we're excited about how it's going to really help with the underwriting and the due diligence process, and how, I think all of us here on the phone or on the line have been doing this. Is like, it used to take us a week to underwrite something. How can we do that in, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? So really just take that work that had to be done in Excel, that, clean up the data. How do we just make that very efficient so you can see very quickly, should I do this deal or not? So I think it's helping with underwriting, connecting firms, potentially, those with more than real estate and various platforms. And then also to what the point I initially mentioned is like the go forward, right? How do we look to construct a portfolio if we think the market's going to do X or Y and rates are going to either rise or decrease? How is that going to affect what we do? And just really have some foresight into our investments.
Yeah, I think it's very similar. What we're seeing from a research perspective, I think making the uh, data increasingly accessible to folks throughout the organization, and also creating a culture, I think around research and around portfolio analytics, where rather than sending ad hoc requests via email, it's like, how can we build tools and applications that are always capturing the same KPIs as you're underwriting a deal, or have some of the historical answers to RFPs or RFQs that you can leverage in a automated format. So just building capabilities that make things faster and more seamless, and you're capturing that historical information and output throughout the organization. And then I think, part of that, the next step then, of course, from a research perspective and pricing signals, right? We're always wanting to have back-tested models that have strong predictive capabilities to make sure that it is the right KPIs and it is the right things that we are measuring on a go-forward basis. And so I think one of the exciting things we found, less so about generative AI, but more about some of the other AI capabilities, is that asset level prediction on a relative basis seems to be a lot more effective than, micro market or sub-market type prediction. And, with, the large data sets that we have today and the stronger capabilities in terms of information processing, that's something that we're really getting into, is asset level scoring. And then I think also around, you know, unstructured data sets and sentiment indicators and some of these newer data sets, right? How do we leverage those as well and work with our teams internally in terms of how they think about the world, and how we can, again, put some of that qualitative knowledge in a more quantitative, consumable output for them.
So seeing immediate gains to speed, efficiency, Brad, you said repeatability or potentially reliability, all good things. Mark, I suppose that the predictability piece sort of proves itself over time. I'm wondering, from a research standpoint, what do you think is most important to get right around benchmarks and pricing signals? And how do you figure out what's worth paying attention to, and how do you align strategy, across all of these potentially predictive signals?
Yeah, I think, the tools are very powerful, and you can put in, pretty much unlimited data sets as long as you structure it correctly. And so part of it is, I think, really, again, working with the teams and making sure you're capturing what is truly signal and not just noise in a lot of these data sets, and that you are having the right input data sets and the right transformations of those data sets in the models, I think is incredibly important. And then I think the second thing is making sure that there are, I think the other power of that is when you show the historical predictive capabilities, because and making the data accessible, that we're having the right prompts and having the right questions to those tools. Because one of the things with generative AI is if you go to ChatGPT and say, hey, um, what are the reasons I should do a multifamily project in Austin right now? It's going to give you a great list of reasons. And if you say, why should I not do a project in multifamily in Austin right now? It's going to give you a great set of reasons to do the opposite. And so really putting guardrails around the market research component, at the same time making the actual data more accessible to just kind of text-based querying.
So one of the watch outs that, anyone who's used LLM has probably noticed is this thing of confirmation bias. So really, really important that we're balancing that with, our perspectives as practitioners. And Mark, to your point, really important to involve the teams and make sure that you're focused on the metrics that actually drive property performance. Um, Jessica, uh, this sort of makes me think about your mandate within KKR with designing new investment and portfolio infrastructure. So how do you drive that scale and adoption without pushing teams into overly rigid processes or things that they won't see the value from?
Yeah, I think it's having them be involved, like, well, I think it's comes down to finding those stakeholders, both at the junior and senior level, who want to change these processes and really leaning into those individuals to figure out what do they want their workflow to look like. And then working with them because they're the ultimate users to refine that so then it's sustainable and manageable. Um, and then I think so that's like an individual team. So it's like zooming in and figuring out something that could help make things very efficient. And then it goes to zooming out to figure out how does this workflow compare to my other business's workflow and how should we bring these together if they need to come together in any sense. So, but yeah, it comes down to these relationships with the stakeholders and having them, have the pen as well to really help author, this, whatever you're writing together. So I think that's the most important in my mind.
So paying attention to best practices across the businesses, and staying close to your stakeholders and your end users.
Exactly, exactly. And then I think it's a bit of wrangling as well. And so oftentimes you have to just wrangle multiple groups again to come into the same process to bring it together. And that's probably the most difficult part.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit more about that. Um, how do you overcome that?
I think it's a two-pronged approach where you go to those individually and hear what they have to say and then kind of have an idea of how to go forward. And then the second prong is then bringing them all together and just like moderating and, being the one in the middle is hey, I know you want A, you want B, can we find something in the middle? So I think it's having that one-on-one interaction and then ultimately coming together to find a common goal. And then also once in a while, so that's more like the carrot approach. And then you need a stick from the top to be like, hey guys, like this is what's gonna happen. So it's a combination of both.
So it's taking that iterative approach, really making sure everyone's perspective is heard, and then knowing when to push a little bit harder, and
Exactly.
and take that momentum and move things forward. Um,
Exactly.
Brad, for companies that are maybe sitting there watching this and thinking, well, we don't have a dedicated, product team. There are things that we want to do, but maybe they haven't taken that first step yet. What would your advice be to leadership of those firms? Like, what's the first step that a CRE investor could take today to start innovating and becoming more data driven?
Good question. There's so many places you can start. I mean, I guess we started with Copilot in ChatGPT Enterprise. Um, so I guess that's where I would lead people. Uh, and again, there are so many different platforms out there that you can use nowadays. So I would try one. I would let the younger generation, let them spread their wings and try to learn from what they figure out to do.
So picking a platform, setting up guardrails so that the data is secure and you're not putting anything inappropriate into any of these LLMs. And then it sounds like also what you've done around uh, sort of a self-identified innovation team could be really effective too. How did that get started at Cabot? And like how might firms think about getting that going, at their own organizations?
Yeah, and that actually started by our chief compliance officer came up with that idea, and she got it from one of her peers. And again, I think getting out there and talking to your colleagues that are at different companies and seeing what they're doing has really benefited us. So I think again, a lot of people are willing to collaborate, and you got to go out there and make time to go collaborate with others.
That's been, I think, a really important takeaway from our conversation today. And maybe I'll start with Brad, and then we can go to Mark and Jessica. I'm curious. So, what are the sort of outlets you look to when exploring, new data investments?
I mean, for an example, Shaw, you knocked on my door, I don't know, 5 months ago, talking about CompStak, and we looked at CompStak 4 or 5 years ago and took a pass then, and I think getting reliable, especially in the industrial world that we're in, getting reliable lease comps out there is very important, especially trying to figure out where rents are going and what city, try to pick the winning cities. Uh, so, um, it's just, again, the data hasn't changed over time. It's just trying to get more accurate data and get more of it.
Yep. And what about do you like either an informal or a formal group of practitioners? Do you have folks that you pick up and call and say, hey, how are you guys thinking about XYZ? Or does that happen through industry conferences, or where do those conversations happen?
Yeah, all the time. I've made plenty of friends over the years at different real estate companies that I still try to communicate with on a day, not probably on a weekly basis, and always, either texting them or sending emails or giving them a call to figure out what they're doing and what they're seeing. Um, that has been probably one of the best things that helped me become the CEO at Cabot is just the network I've built over the years.
Mark and Jessica, where or who do you look for? Where do you look to for inspiration or as a sounding board?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to what Brad mentioned, it's, your own networks, it's, researchers from across the industry. I think actually, one of the best areas for idea sharing that I found has been the CompStak advisory board. I think the group that you've assembled in that room has been excellent in terms of what I've seen in terms of leading edge applications of some of the data. And then, to me, part of it too is just thinking about, we have a couple data scientists on staff. They're very heavily involved in some of their industry organizations, going to conferences like Posit, et cetera. So hearing what, groups in other industries are doing and how they're applying some of these tools, I think has been really interesting as well and really useful.
And Jessica, where do you look to for inspiration?
Yeah, I echo Mark and Brad's sentiment where it's a combination of those in this industry. But then also at KKR, we're pretty lucky to have a dedicated AI team, for example, AI engineering. We're building out AI product management. So between a few of us in the team, there's a lot of places to go to. And then within the industry context, just bouncing ideas around. And then ultimately, I think it's about being agile and trying something. If it doesn't work, pivot. And, just having that iterative mentality of always being really, being creative and trying the latest and greatest. I think that's first and foremost for all of these initiatives.
Well, great insights from Brad, Jessica, and Mark. I want to really thank you so much for sharing your insights and your time with us today. Hope we can do it again soon. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, and please reach out if you have any questions.